My name is Eleanor Dashwood. I lived with my mother and two sisters, Marianne and Margaret, in a large house called Norland Park. It was our home for many happy years. My father loved the place very much, but when he died, everything changed. My father's property did not belong to us. It went to my half-brother John Dashwood, the son from my father's first marriage. Father asked John to take care of us, but John's wife, Fanny, did not like that idea. She was proud, selfish, and rich. She wanted all the money and comfort for herself and her own little boy. Soon after Father's death, John and Fanny came to live in Norland Park. Mother, my sisters, and I became guests in our own house. We tried to be kind and quiet, but it was difficult. Fanny made us feel unwelcome. My mother, Mrs. Dashwood, was a very good woman. She was warm-hearted and full of feeling, but she often followed her emotions too quickly. I, on the other hand, tried to be calm and careful. My sister Marianne was very different from me. She was romantic and full of passion. She believed love should be wild, strong, and true. She laughed loudly, cried easily, and never hid her feelings. One afternoon, everything began to change. Fanny's brother, Edward Ferrars, came to stay at Norland. He was quiet, polite, and kind. He did not look handsome at first, but there was something gentle and honest in his eyes. He talked to everyone, but he listened the most to me. I liked that. Edward and I spent many hours together, walking in the garden and reading. I felt something growing between us. Not fast, not like in the stories Marianne loved, but slow and real. I did not tell anyone about my feelings, but I think my mother guessed. She was happy for me, and so was Marianne. But Fanny noticed too. One morning, she came to my mother and spoke sharply. "Edward is my brother," she said, "and he will marry well. He cannot marry a poor girl with no fortune." Those words broke my mother's heart. We knew then that we could not stay any longer at Norland Park. My mother decided we must move to a smaller house. A kind cousin, Sir John Middleton, offered us a cottage in Devonshire, far away in the countryside. It was called Barton Cottage, near his grand house, Barton Park. Leaving Norland was painful. It was our home, full of memories of my father and of Edward. I wanted to say goodbye to Edward before we left, but I never had the chance. He was quiet and sad when we met for the last time. He only said, "I hope we meet again, Miss Dashwood." I smiled and said, "I hope so too." But deep inside, I was afraid we never would. Our new life at Barton Cottage was very different. The house was small but cozy, and the countryside was beautiful. Sir John and his wife, Lady Middleton, were kind to us, though they were sometimes too noisy and curious. They invited us to dinner and introduced us to many new people. One of them was Colonel Brandon, a serious but gentle man of about 35. He had kind eyes and spoke softly, especially to Marianne. He seemed to admire her very much, but Marianne thought he was too old and too dull. She wanted excitement, poetry, and adventure. One rainy afternoon, Marianne went for a long walk alone. The sky was dark and the wind was strong. When she came back, she slipped and fell on the wet hill. Her ankle hurt badly. At that moment, a young man on a horse rode by. He saw her fall, jumped down and helped her. He carried her home himself. His name was Mr. Willoughby. He was handsome, charming, and full of life. Exactly the kind of man Marianne dreamed of. From that day, she thought of no one else. Willoughby visited our house every day. He read poetry with her, talked of music and art, and laughed with her in the garden. Everyone believed they were engaged, though he never said it clearly. My mother was happy for Marianne, but I was more careful. Willoughby was too perfect, too quick, too smooth. I wanted to believe he was good, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. One morning, Willoughby came to our cottage early. His face was pale, and he looked worried. Marianne ran to meet him, smiling. But when she saw his face, her smile disappeared. "I must leave Barton," he said suddenly. "Leave?" she repeated. "But why? When will you return?" "I cannot say," he answered. His voice was cold and strange. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. "You cannot mean this. You cannot just go away." He said nothing more. He took her hand, pressed it quickly, and left. Marianne stood at the door, silent and trembling. Then she turned and ran to her room. I followed her, but she would not speak. For days, she stayed alone, reading his letters again and again, but no new letter came. She refused to eat. She cried through the nights. I wanted to comfort her, but my own heart was heavy too. I missed Edward. I wondered if he had forgotten me, or if his sister had stopped him from writing. One evening, while I was sitting by the fire, Sir John came in with a smile. "Miss Dashwood," he said, "we have visitors coming tomorrow. A very good friend of ours, Mrs. Jennings, and some young ladies you will like." I smiled politely, though I did not care about visitors. I only hoped that one day I might hear news of Edward Ferrars again. But life at Barton Cottage was about to bring more surprises. For me, for Marianne, and for our whole family. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next morning, our little house was full of visitors. Sir John brought Mrs. Jennings, a cheerful old lady who loved to talk and laugh. She was kind, but she liked gossip too much. She often teased Marianne about Mr. Willoughby and asked, "When shall we hear the wedding bells?" Marianne turned red and smiled shyly, though her heart was breaking inside. She still hoped Willoughby would return. I knew she suffered, but I could do nothing except stay near her. A few days later, 2 young ladies arrived, Miss Steele and her younger sister Lucy. They were distant cousins of Mrs. Jennings and were invited to stay for a few weeks. The elder one, Lucy, was pretty and polite. At first I liked her, though I did not know her well. She seemed sweet and talkative. One evening, when we were alone, Lucy began to ask me many questions about Norland Park and about the Ferrars family. Her eyes watched me carefully. I wondered why she was so curious. Finally, she smiled and said softly, I think you know my dear friend, Mr. Edward Ferrars. My heart jumped, but I tried to stay calm. Yes, I said quietly. He is my friend too. Her smile grew sharper. He is more than my friend, she whispered. We are secretly engaged. For a moment I could not speak. I felt cold, as if all the air had left the room. Engaged? I said in surprise. Yes, she said proudly, for 4 years now. But his mother does not know. She would never agree because I have no fortune. So we keep it secret. I smiled weakly and said, I see. But inside, my heart broke. That night I could not sleep. I lay awake thinking of Edward, his quiet smile, his kind voice, his honesty. Was it all just kindness, not love? I remembered every word he ever said to me, every look, every walk we shared. I had always believed his heart was mine, but now I saw I had been wrong. Still, I decided to keep this secret to myself. I did not want to hurt my mother or Marianne. My pain was private. Marianne's pain was loud and visible, but mine was silent and hidden. Days passed, and Lucy continued to talk about Edward. I listened politely, though it hurt. I learned that they met when Lucy was very young, and that Edward's family wanted him to marry someone rich, not her. She said she loved him deeply, but sometimes I saw in her eyes that she wanted me to know she had won. When Lucy and her sister left, I felt some relief. But then another event changed our lives again. Mrs. Jennings invited us to London for the winter. My mother was worried, but Marianne was eager to go. Perhaps Willoughby will be there, she said with shining eyes. I agreed to go because I wanted to protect Marianne. I did not want her to meet Willoughby alone if he was indeed in London, so we went. The city was full of noise, light, and endless visitors. Mrs. Jennings's house was warm and lively, but sometimes too loud for me. Every evening people came for tea or dinner. They talked of parties, fashion, and love stories. The day after we arrived, Marianne sent a letter to Willoughby. She waited all day for an answer, but no letter came. The next day she sent another. Still no reply. She began to worry. Perhaps he is sick, she said. Then one night, while we were driving home from a party, she saw him. He was across the street, laughing with a group of rich people. She called out his name, Willoughby! He looked up, but his face changed. He bowed quickly and walked away. Marianne turned pale. He did not speak to me, she whispered. Why would he do that? The next morning, a letter arrived, but not from him. Not in his handwriting. It was a cold, formal note. It said he was engaged to a rich young lady named Miss Grey, and that he wished Marianne well. She read the letter again and again. Then she fell on the floor crying. Her hands shook, and her tears would not stop. I lifted her gently and held her close. Marianne, I whispered, you must be strong. But she cried, he has broken my heart. He loved me. I know he did. How can he marry another woman? I had no answer. I could only hold her while she wept. In the days that followed, Marianne's health grew worse. She refused food and sleep. Mrs. Jennings and I were very worried. I tried to keep her busy, but nothing helped. One morning, Mrs. Jennings came running into my room. "Miss Dashwood," she said, "I have news. Good news. Mr. Willoughby is here in London again." I looked at her in surprise. "Does he wish to see Marianne?" "Yes," she said. "He sent a note asking if he might visit." When he arrived that evening, I met him in the sitting room. His face was pale, and he looked unhappy. "Miss Dashwood," he said, "I must speak to you. Please believe me. I never meant to hurt Marianne." His voice was low and full of regret. He told me his story. He said he truly loved Marianne, but he had no money. When Miss Gray, a rich woman, offered him marriage, he accepted because he was in debt. "I was weak," he said. "I lost the woman I loved because I was a coward." I listened quietly. When he left, I did not tell Marianne about his visit. She had already suffered enough. After that, we returned to Barton Cottage to rest. The journey was long, and Marianne was still pale and weak. I worried about her. One evening, while we were passing through a small town, Marianne became very ill. It was raining hard, and the wind was cold. We stopped at an inn and called for a doctor. I sat by her side all night, holding her hand, afraid she would not wake. By morning, she was burning with fever. I sent for help. That evening, to my surprise, Colonel Brandon arrived. He had heard of our situation and came at once. He looked at Marianne with deep concern. "I will bring the best doctor," he said, and he did. For days, he stayed near us. He brought medicine, fruit, and fresh air. He spoke to me with kindness, though his eyes were full of worry. I saw now that he truly loved Marianne, not with passion like Willoughby, but with quiet strength and care. Slowly, Marianne began to recover. One afternoon, she opened her eyes and whispered, "Eleanor, is this death?" I smiled and said softly, "No, my love, it is life, and you will live." When she was strong enough to sit up, I told her that Willoughby was married. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I pity him, Eleanor. He has lost more than I have." Her words surprised me. She had grown wiser. After we returned home, Colonel Brandon visited often. He never spoke of love, but his care for Marianne never stopped. My mother saw it too and hoped that one day Marianne might care for him. As for me, I still thought of Edward every day. I wondered if he had married Lucy. I tried to prepare my heart for the news, but it still hurt to imagine. Then, one morning, a letter came from London. Mrs. Jennings wrote that there was a great scandal. Lucy Steele had broken her secret engagement with Edward and married his brother Robert Ferrars instead. For a moment, I could not believe it. Lucy, who had spoken of love and loyalty, had left Edward for money. I did not know what to feel, joy, surprise, or pity. But my heart beat faster because now Edward was free. That same afternoon, I was sitting by the window when I saw a man walking up the hill toward our cottage. He was thin and pale, with tired eyes. My heart began to race. It was Edward Ferrars. He entered the room quietly. My mother greeted him warmly. "We are so happy to see you, Mr. Ferrars," she said. "We heard you are married." Edward smiled sadly. "No, ma'am," he said. "It is my brother who is married. Lucy has chosen him instead of me." My mother looked at me quickly, but I kept my eyes down. I did not want Edward to see the tears in them. He stayed for tea. We talked politely, but every word felt heavy. Then, after a long silence, he turned to me. "Miss Dashwood," he said softly, "I came to ask you something." My hands trembled. He continued, "I have loved you for a long time. I did not hope you could ever forgive my silence. But now that I am free, will you allow me to speak again?" I could not answer. I tried to speak, but tears came first. At last I said, "Yes, Edward, with all my heart." He took my hand, and for the first time in many months, I felt peace. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. I thought of all we had suffered, my quiet pain, Marianne's broken heart, our struggles and lessons. But now, perhaps, happiness had found us again. When Edward spoke those words, I could not stop crying. For months, I had carried the pain alone. I had tried to be calm for my family, for Marianne, for everyone. But now, at last, I could breathe again. My mother cried too. She was full of joy. "My dear Eleanor," she said, "you deserve this happiness." Even Marianne, though still pale and weak, smiled through her tears. "Now, it is your turn to be happy," she whispered. Edward stayed with us for several days. He helped in the garden, walked with us, and spoke with my mother for long hours. He was quiet, gentle, and kind, as he always had been. When I looked at him, I remembered all the pain I had felt when I thought he belonged to someone else. And now he was here, asking for nothing but my heart. A few weeks later, Edward went to speak to my mother again. I waited in another room, my heart beating fast. When he came back, he smiled softly. "Your mother has given her consent," he said. "If you still wish it, I would like to make you my wife." I said yes. I could not say anything else. Our wedding was simple. We did not have much money, but we had peace. Edward had a small parish offered to him by Colonel Brandon, a humble home with a lovely garden and kind neighbors. It was not grand, but it was enough for us. Marianne stood beside me that day, her hand in mine. She looked happy again, though her eyes were softer now. She had changed. Her face no longer showed the wild excitement it once did, but a quiet grace. She had learned much from her sorrow. After my marriage, I lived near Barton Cottage. I often visited my mother and sisters. Colonel Brandon came too, always kind and gentle, never asking for more than Marianne could give. One afternoon, As I sat by the fire with my husband, Mary Ann came to visit us. She had been walking with Colonel Brandon. Her cheeks were rosy and her smile was peaceful. "Eleanor," she said, sitting beside me, "I want to tell you something." "What is it, my love?" I asked. She looked down, then up again, her eyes bright but calm. "I used to think love must be wild and full of tears," she said. "I thought only passion could make a heart true. But now I understand that love can also be quiet and kind. Colonel Brandon has shown me that." I took her hand and said, "He is a good man, Mary Ann. He loves you deeply." "Yes," she whispered, smiling softly. "And I love him too." In the spring they married. Their wedding was gentle and beautiful. Colonel Brandon looked happier than I had ever seen him. Mary Ann, in her white dress, looked calm and full of grace. She had found her peace at last. Our 2 cottages were not far apart, and we visited each other often. Sometimes I would sit with my mother in the garden, watching the sun go down over the hills. She often said, "My daughters are happy. What more could a mother want?" Life became simple again. I learned to enjoy the small things. The sound of Edward's voice as he read in the evening, the laughter of our friends at Barton Park, the quiet comfort of home. Still, sometimes I thought of the past, of Norland Park, of Fanny's cruel words, of the day we left our first home. So much pain had come from pride and greed, yet so much good had come from patience and kindness. One rainy evening, when I was sitting near the window, Edward asked softly, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I smiled. "No," I said. "If they had been different, perhaps we would not be here together." He smiled too, and we sat in silence, listening to the rain. As for Mary Ann, her life with Colonel Brandon grew happier each year. He cared for her as tenderly as he had when she was sick. He never raised his voice, never demanded her love. He simply gave it every day, and she, who once lived only for passion and poetry, now found joy in peace and understanding. Sometimes, when we all gathered at Barton Park, I watched my sister and saw how much she had grown. She was still lively and sweet, but her heart was wiser. She often said to me, "Eleanor, I once thought you were cold, but now I see you were only strong. Sense is not the enemy of feeling. It is what keeps the heart safe." Her words made me smile. "And sensibility," I said, "gives life its warmth. Without your heart, Mary Ann, our family would never have loved so deeply." We laughed together. The pain of the past had become only a memory, something that had shaped us but no longer hurt us. Years passed. Our mother grew older but still cheerful. Margaret grew up and often visited London. Sir John still told his funny stories, and Mrs. Jennings still laughed too loudly and asked too many questions. But whenever I looked around the table, at Edward reading quietly, at Mary Ann listening to Colonel Brandon with shining eyes, at our mother smiling at us both, I felt thankful. Life had not given us riches or great fame, but it had given us something better: peace, love, and understanding. We had learned what true happiness means: For Marianne, it was learning that love is not only fire and music, but also patience and care. For me, it was learning that sometimes, even when the heart breaks in silence, hope still grows quietly beneath the pain. Our stories were different, but our lessons were the same. Sense and sensibility, reason and feeling. Not enemies. They are sisters, like Marianne and me. Together, they make life whole. And so, as the sun set over the green hills of Barton, I felt grateful for everything. For the laughter, the tears, the lessons, and the love that time had finally made gentle. Cha! Emma Woodhouse lived in a quiet English village called Highbury. She was a pretty young woman with bright eyes and a kind smile. She was clever, rich, and loved by everyone around her. Emma lived in a big, comfortable house called Hartfield with her father, Mr. Woodhouse. Her mother had died when she was very young, but her father always took great care of her. He was kind and gentle, but often worried too much about health and safety. Emma was his joy, and he liked to keep her close. Emma had never gone to school far from home. Her teacher, Miss Taylor, had lived with them for many years. She was more like a friend than a teacher. Miss Taylor cared for Emma, taught her how to read and write, and watched her grow up. When the story begins, Miss Taylor has just married a man named Mr. Weston. This made Emma very happy and a little proud because she believed that she was the one who helped them fall in love. She often said to herself, "If I did not bring them together, they might never have married." Emma felt pleased with her skill in matching people's hearts. But now that Miss Taylor was married and had moved away, Emma felt a little lonely. The house felt too quiet. Her father did not like to go out often, so Emma missed having someone to talk to all day. Still, she told herself that she would be happy. She said, "I will not marry soon. I am rich, I have my father, and I have my friends. I can be happy without a husband." She liked to help others find love instead. One of her closest family friends was Mr. Knightley. He was a sensible man who lived nearby at Donwell Abbey. He was about 16 years older than Emma and had known her since she was a child. He often visited Hartfield and gave her advice. He liked Emma very much, but he did not always agree with her ideas. When Emma said she had helped Miss Taylor and Mr. Weston fall in love, Mr. Knightley smiled and said, "No, Emma, they would have married anyway. You only think you helped." Emma laughed and replied, "Perhaps you are right, but I like to think I helped a little." Mr. Knightley shook his head and said gently, "You will soon learn that trying to make matches is not always wise." A few weeks later, Emma met a new friend named Harriet Smith. Harriet was a sweet, simple girl who went to a nearby school. She did not know much about her real family, but she was polite and cheerful. Emma liked her at once. She thought Harriet was very pretty and gentle, but a little shy. Emma quickly decided that she would help Harriet find a good husband. She said to herself, "Harriet is too good for common men. She must marry someone better." At that time, a young farmer named Robert Martin liked Harriet. He was kind, honest, and hardworking. He visited her often, and Harriet liked him too. But when Emma learned about it, she was not happy. "Oh no, Harriet," she said. You must not think of Mr. Martin. He is a farmer. You are meant for something higher." Harriet looked surprised. "But he is very good to me," she said softly. Emma smiled kindly but said, "Good is not enough. You can do better." Harriet listened to Emma because she admired her and wanted to please her. A few days later, Mr. Martin wrote a letter to Harriet. It was a simple, honest letter asking her to marry him. Harriet was confused. She liked Mr. Martin very much and thought he would make a good husband. But she also respected Emma's opinion, so she took the letter to Emma and asked what she should do. Emma read it and said, "It is a good letter, but you must not accept. You should not marry a farmer." Harriet looked sad but said, "If you think I should not, I will not." She wrote a kind but firm answer to Mr. Martin, saying no. When Emma saw the letter, she felt proud of Harriet's courage. Mr. Knightley soon heard about it. He was not pleased. When he visited Hartfield, he said to Emma, "You were wrong. Mr. Martin is an excellent young man. Harriet would have been happy with him." Emma shook her head. "He may be good," she said, "but Harriet can marry someone better. Mr. Knightley looked at her seriously and said, "You are playing with other people's lives, Emma. It is not right." But Emma only smiled and replied, "I want my friends to be happy. That is all." A few days later, Emma took Harriet to visit Mr. Elton, the village vicar. Mr. Elton was young and polite, and he liked to talk with Emma. She thought, "He will be perfect for Harriet." Emma began to plan how to bring them together. She invited Mr. Elton to Hartfield often and always found a way to make him sit near Harriet. When they talked, she smiled secretly, thinking her plan was working well. At Christmas, Mr. Elton joined Emma and her friends for a small party. He brought a poem he had written. Emma was sure it was for Harriet. She looked at Harriet, who was blushing happily. But Mr. Knightley noticed something different. He thought Mr. Elton looked at Emma more than at Harriet. He tried to warn her quietly, "Emma, I think you may be mistaken about Mr. Elton's feelings." Emma laughed and said, "You are wrong again. I know what I am doing." When winter came, the roads became icy, and it was hard to visit friends. One evening, Emma and her father went to a small dinner party at Mrs. Weston's house. Harriet stayed at home because she had a cold. Mr. Elton was also at the dinner. Emma thought it was a good chance to speak about Harriet, but before she could say anything, it started to snow heavily and everyone decided to leave early. Mr. Elton offered to take Emma home in his carriage. Her father was happy because he did not want her to walk in the snow. Inside the carriage, Emma was thinking about Harriet. She smiled and said kindly, "Harriet will be very happy when she knows how much you care for her." Mr. Elton looked surprised. "Harriet," he said. "Miss Smith? I never cared for her. It is you I admire, Miss Woodhouse." Emma was shocked. "Me?" she said quickly. "You must be joking." But Mr. Elton was serious. "I am not joking," he said. "I have loved you for a long time." Emma could not believe what she was hearing. She looked away and said, "You have made a mistake. I never thought of you in that way. I believed you liked Harriet." Mr. Elton laughed softly and said, "Harriet, a farmer's daughter? Never." Emma felt embarrassed and angry. When she reached home, she was quiet. She went to her room and thought, "How foolish I have been. Mr. Knightley was right. I did not understand anything." The next morning, she told her father that Mr. Elton was not the man she thought he was. Mr. Woodhouse said gently, "My dear, I am glad you did not want to marry him yourself." Emma sighed. "Poor Harriet," she said. "She will be very unhappy." She knew now that she had been wrong. She had tried to control someone else's heart, and it had only caused pain. But she still wanted to make things right. She promised herself that she would not play with love again. Yet in her heart, she did not know that love would still surprise her later. Before continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now let's continue. After the shocking night in the carriage with Mr. Elton, Emma felt both sad and embarrassed. She could not believe that she had made such a big mistake. She had truly believed that Mr. Elton liked Harriet, but he only wanted to marry someone rich and important. Emma now understood that she had hurt Harriet without meaning to. When Emma told Harriet what had happened, Harriet cried. She felt ashamed and broken. "I thought he liked me," she said softly. Emma felt terrible. "No, Harriet, it was all my fault," she said kindly. "You did nothing wrong. I gave you false hope. I promise I will never try to arrange a match again." Harriet looked at her with tears in her eyes. "You are my best friend, Emma. I will always trust you." For a few weeks, life in Highbury became quiet again. Mr. Elton went away to visit friends in another town. Emma was glad. She did not want to see him. Winter slowly passed, and soon spring came. Flowers began to bloom, and people started to visit each other again. One morning, a letter arrived from Mrs. Weston. She was very excited. She wrote that her husband's son, Frank Churchill, would soon visit Highbury. Everyone had heard of him before. Frank was handsome, charming, and full of life. Mr. Weston loved him dearly. Emma had never met Frank, but had heard many stories. Mrs. Weston said to Emma, "You must meet Frank. He will be perfect company for you." Emma laughed. No, I am not looking for anyone. I am happy as I am," she said. But in her heart, she felt curious. When Frank Churchill finally arrived, everyone liked him at once. He was friendly and spoke kindly to everyone. He smiled often and made people laugh. Emma found him very pleasant. They talked easily together, and she thought he was very clever. Mr. Knightley, however, was not sure. He said quietly, "He seems too charming. I am not sure if he is honest." Emma disagreed. "You are always too serious, Mr. Knightley," she said playfully. "Frank is fun and full of spirit." Mr. Knightley shook his head and smiled. "Maybe, but be careful, Emma. Appearances can be tricky." Emma and Frank began to spend more time together. They met at small parties, went for walks, and visited mutual friends. everyone began to whisper that Emma and Frank would soon fall in love. Emma heard the gossip, but only smiled. "I am not in love," she said to herself. "But it is nice to have a friend like him." Still, sometimes she caught herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. One day, they both went to visit Mrs. Bates and her niece, Jane Fairfax. Jane was a quiet, gentle young woman. She was beautiful and talented. She played the piano wonderfully and spoke politely to everyone. Emma admired her skills, but felt a little jealous. Jane had spent time in London and seemed wiser than the girls of Highbury. Frank, however, showed great interest in Jane. He praised her piano playing and often joked with her. Emma noticed this and began to wonder. "Does he like her?" she thought. Then she laughed to herself. "No, they are only friends. Frank is friendly with everyone." Soon after, there was a grand ball at the Crown Inn. Everyone in Highbury was invited. Emma was very excited. She loved to dance. Frank asked her to be his partner, and she said yes happily. That night, she wore a beautiful white dress and looked lovely. Frank danced with her all evening, and everyone said how perfect they looked together. Harriet also came to the ball, but something sad happened to her. When she entered the room, she felt shy. No one asked her to dance at first. Mr. Elton was there with his new wife, and when he saw Harriet, he turned away coldly. His wife whispered and laughed. Harriet looked down and felt small. Emma noticed it and felt angry. "How rude he is," she said to Frank. Frank looked at Harriet kindly. "Shall I ask her to dance?" he said. Emma smiled with relief. "Yes, please do." Frank walked straight to Harriet and said, "May I have this dance?" Everyone saw his kindness. Harriet's face lit up with joy. She danced happily, and Emma's heart warmed. She thought, "Frank is truly good." He made her smile again. After the ball, Emma began to think that perhaps she might love Frank after all. He was kind, handsome, and fun. She liked how he treated her father and friends, but deep inside, she was not sure. She sometimes thought of Mr. Knightley's calm, serious eyes and his honest words, but she quickly pushed the thought away. "Mr. Knightley is like family," she told herself. "Frank is new and exciting." A few weeks later, Harriet told Emma something surprising. "Emma," she said shyly, "I think I am in love again." Emma looked at her with wide eyes. "Really? With whom this time?" Harriet smiled and said softly, "I cannot tell you yet, but he is much above me." Emma thought for a moment and then said, "It must be Frank Churchill." Harriet blushed but did not answer. Emma smiled secretly. "Yes, it must be him," she thought. "And this time, I will not stop her." But soon, the truth began to change everything. One morning, news came to Highbury that shocked everyone. Frank Churchill was engaged. He had been secretly engaged to Jane Fairfax for many months. No one had known, not even his father. Emma was speechless. She sat down and whispered, "So he was never interested in me at all." She thought about how foolish she had been again. When Harriet heard the news, she also turned pale. Emma saw her pain and said gently, "I am sorry, Harriet. I know this must hurt you." Harriet looked surprised and said, "Me? Oh no, Emma. I never loved Mr. Churchill. You misunderstood me. I liked someone else." Emma looked at her carefully. "Someone else? Who?" Harriet looked down and said, "Mr. Knightley." Emma felt as if the world stopped for a moment. "Mr. Knightley?" she said slowly. "Yes," Harriet said. "He has always been so kind to me. I thought maybe he could care for me." Emma could not speak. Her heart began to beat fast. Until that moment, she had never truly understood her own feelings. She suddenly realized that she cared deeply for Mr. Knightley herself. That night, Emma could not sleep. She walked around her room, thinking of every time Mr. Knightley had spoken kindly to her, had warned her, had looked at her with concern. She remembered how much she respected him, and now she knew the truth. "I love him," she whispered. "I always have, but I did not know it." Emma felt torn between guilt and fear. She had guided Harriet wrongly again, and now her mistake had reached her own heart. What if Mr. Knightley loves Harriet? She thought. I cannot bear it. The next day, Emma saw Mr. Knightley walking in the garden. Her heart raced. He looked serious. She thought he had come to speak about Harriet. She tried to smile, though she felt weak inside. "You have heard the news about Frank Churchill?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I am glad you are not hurt by it." She looked down and said softly, "I was foolish again." He stepped closer. "Emma," he said, "you are never foolish in my eyes. I only wish you knew how much I care for you." Emma looked up, surprised. He continued quietly, "I love you, Emma. I always have." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You love me?" she whispered. "Yes," he said gently. "And I hoped you might love me too." Emma smiled through her tears. "I do. I love you very much." Mr. Knightley took her hand, and she felt peace in her heart. The long confusion, the pride, the mistakes, all of it suddenly seemed small. She had finally learned the truth about herself and about love. But one thing still worried her. Harriet did not know about this. Emma felt guilty and afraid of hurting her again. She knew she must talk to her soon and be honest. Emma felt both happy and sad after Mr. Knightley's visit. She was happy because she loved him and he loved her too. But she was also worried about Harriet. Harriet was her friend, and she did not want to hurt her again. That night, Emma sat by the window and thought for a long time. The moon was bright, and the garden was quiet. She said softly, "I have made many mistakes, but I must be honest now." The next morning, Emma asked Harriet to visit Hartfield. Harriet came with a kind smile, not knowing what Emma wanted to say. They sat together in the sitting room. Emma looked at her gently and said, "Harriet, I need to tell you something important." Harriet looked a little nervous. "Yes, Emma?" she asked. Emma took a deep breath. I have spoken with Mr. Knightley, she said slowly. He told me that he loves me. Harriet's face went pale. She looked down at her hands and said nothing. Emma continued softly, I did not plan this. I did not know how I felt until recently. I understand that this must be hard for you. Harriet's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled a little. It is all right, Emma, she said quietly. I see now that he was never meant for me. He was kind, but not in love with me. You and he belong together. Emma reached for her hand. You are my dear friend, Harriet, she said. I never wanted to hurt you. You deserve real love, and I know you will find it one day. Harriet smiled. I hope so, but please do not worry. I am not angry. Emma felt a wave of relief. For the first time in many months, her heart felt light. A few days later, Harriet decided to visit some friends in another village for a short time. Emma thought it was a good idea. You need rest, she said. You will feel better away from Highbury. Harriet agreed and left with a gentle hug. When she was gone, Emma spent more time with her father and Mr. Knightley. Mr. Woodhouse was very happy to have Mr. Knightley at Hartfield. He trusted him and liked his company. But when Emma told her father that she wanted to marry Mr. Knightley, he became worried. Oh, my dear, he said, if you marry, you will leave me. I cannot live without you. Emma smiled softly and said, Papa, I will not leave you. Mr. Knightley and I have already spoken about it. He will come to live here at Hartfield with us. Mr. Woodhouse looked surprised. Will he really? He asked. Yes, Emma said. He wants to make sure we are both happy. Mr. Woodhouse finally smiled. Then I am at peace. He is a good man. Life in Highbury soon returned to its calm rhythm. The summer days were long and bright. People spoke kindly of Emma and Mr. Knightley. Everyone said it was a perfect match. Mrs. Weston was especially happy. I always knew this would happen, she said with a warm laugh. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived for Emma. It was from Harriet. Emma opened it quickly and read the words with joy. Harriet wrote that she was now engaged to Robert Martin, the kind farmer she had refused before. He had met her again during her visit and had asked her to marry him once more. This time, she had said yes. Emma smiled with tears in her eyes. Oh, Harriet, she said softly, you will be happy at last. When Mr. Knightley came that evening, she showed him the letter. He smiled and said, I am glad. I always thought Mr. Martin was the right man for her. Emma laughed gently. Yes, you were right again. A few weeks later, Harriet came back to Highbury. She looked healthy and cheerful. When Emma saw her, she hugged her tightly. You look happy, Emma said. Harriet blushed and said, I am Emma. Mr. Martin is good and honest. I think we will have a peaceful life together. Emma smiled. That is all I ever wanted for you. They sat in the garden and talked about everything that had happened. There were no hard feelings between them. Harriet said, You taught me a lot, Emma. I was foolish sometimes, but I learned that love cannot be made by another person. It comes naturally." Emma nodded. "Yes, I learned the same thing." They both laughed softly, feeling close again. As the days passed, preparations began for both weddings. Harriet and Mr. Martin planned to marry quietly at the church in Highbury. Emma and Mr. Knightley chose to marry soon after. Mr. Woodhouse still worried, but he saw how kind and gentle Mr. Knightley was to everyone, especially to Emma. On the morning of Emma's wedding, the sun shone brightly over the village. The church bells rang softly. Emma wore a simple white dress and looked graceful. Mr. Knightley waited for her with calm eyes and a warm smile. When she reached him, she felt peace in her heart. She remembered all her past mistakes, all her wrong guesses about love, and smiled at how much she had grown. During the ceremony, she looked at her friends and family, Mr. Woodhouse, Mrs. Weston, and even Harriet, who smiled happily from her seat. Emma's heart was full. She realized that happiness was not in making plans for others, but in understanding and forgiving herself. After the wedding, there was a small party at Hartfield. The house was full of laughter and joy. Emma's father sat near the window, watching his daughter and her husband. "I am happy now," he said softly. Mr. Knightley smiled at him and said, "And I will take care of her always." As the evening came, Emma and Mr. Knightley walked together in the garden. The air was cool, and the stars began to appear. Emma looked up and said, "I was wrong so many times, but somehow everything ended well." Mr. Knightley took her hand gently and said, "Because your heart was always good, Emma. You only needed to see it clearly." Emma smiled and looked at him with love. "I see it now," she said. "I see what truly matters." And there, under the quiet sky of Highbury, they began their life together with understanding, honesty, and love.